going to do some NTP configuration. So, NTP configuration. NTP stands for Network Time Protocol, and it allows for you to synchronize device times between devices, right? In this lab, what we're gonna do is we're going to have one NTP server that allows for other devices to sync their time off of its clock. And that's essentially what we're gonna do. It's gonna be very basic, but this is not one of my favorite subjects because, yeah, it's not one of my favorite subjects. So I'm probably gonna be a little bit rusty with it. So we have 4 steps here, right? We're gonna essentially configure time zone, the time and date on R1 to match the local time, which is gonna be my local time. And then we're going to do a configuration on R1 as an NTP server with the default stratum level. The default stratum level is 8. And the stratum level essentially tells you how authoritative that time source is. Step 3, we're going to configure R2 to sync its time with R1. And then step 4, we're going to configure R3 to sync its time to R2. So R2 is going to get its time from R3 is going to get its time from R2, R2 is going to get its time from R1, and R1 is going to use itself as a time source. Thanks, Lewis. Yeah, I definitely will keep it up. I love this stuff. This stuff is absolutely super fun. I love it. Said, I'm currently working in cybersecurity right now. I'm studying and practicing to get CEH practical. Nice. Is that certification, first of all, how is it working in cybersecurity? Because I hear a lot of mixed reviews. I hear that the burnout rate is kind of like high because of all the alerts that you guys get depending on where you're working. And is the CEH, I think that's the Certified Ethical Hacker certification, is that difficult? I heard it's really expensive, but is it difficult? I found out about CompTIA search recently, so I found your stream interesting. Yes, thank you, man. I do a lot of CompTIA A+ content. I have also a YouTube channel, IPV Dre, and CompTIA A+ is a hit because a lot of people are transitioning into the IT field, including myself. Initially, I was in the STEM field. I did, well, I don't want to say I was in the STEM field, but I started out in STEM. And I got an engineering degree, then I went and got a psychology degree, but then I pivoted back to STEM and started going the IT wave, right? And I quickly got my ITF, my CompTIA ITF, my CompTIA A+, and my CCNA. Got that all within 2 years, right? So a lot of the A+ stuff is popular on my channel and YouTube in general because a lot of people are venturing into that. And I think it's a solid foundation for the fundamentals, and it helps you figure out what you want to do in the field. So yeah, it's very yeah, A+ is really dope because again, it gives you that groundwork, right? So yeah, so what's step 1? Step 1, configure time zone, time, and date on R1 to match local time. All right, so I need to look up my time first, or you'll see in a second. So, so UTC is 4 hours ahead from 11, right? It's 11:16 currently where I'm at. So it's gonna be 12, 1, 2, 3. Right? Let me see. I'm just gonna make sure I have it correct. Yeah, so currently it's 3:16 Coordinated Universal Time, UTC. And if you are following along on this, following along with me on this lab on YouTube, you're gonna definitely have to figure out what your UTC is, but it doesn't really matter because this is a lab, right? So I'm just using more accurate configuration, because this is something that I need to work on. So I'm actually learning as I go along, and I didn't even work on this lab before I did this stream. So there's that. Let's see how this turns out, because we know how it goes when I do these labs. End up getting some type of error messages and syntax errors. So yeah. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to configure time zone, time and date on R1 to match local time. So let's get familiar with the show commands. And what we're going to do is we're going to do show clock, do show clock, and we see that it's the default time, right? This is typically default. It's expressed in UTC. It's Monday, March 1st, 1993, apparently. And now we're gonna show the detail, show clock detail, which is gonna tell us where we're getting our our time from, the source time, right? And we're gonna actually do show clock detail. So the time source is hardware calendar. That's fine. And Lewis said, yes, that's what I heard. A+ is a really good cert. Like you said, CEH is very expensive, but in my opinion, it's not that hard. Okay, that's great. I'm pretty sure it's worth it. The official material is too long, so I found alternative resources to study and I passed it with no problems. Oh, so there's two parts to the CEH. There's the written, and then you said the practical. That's cool. I want to get my CCIE like somewhere down the line, and the CCIE is kind of like the same setup, where you have to pass the written and then you have to pass the practical, which is a lab, right? So yeah, that's cool, man. Go ahead, do that. Definitely do that. Cybersecurity is super hot right now. So yeah, that's cool. That's dope. That's dope. All right, so first thing we're gonna have to do is we are going to have to configure the time zone. We see here that the time source is the hardware calendar. It's the hardware that the router's getting its time from. I believe there's also a software clock, right? But we're not gonna get into that right now, because again, this is not my favorite subject. So let's just get through this, right? So in global configuration mode, we change the time zone. In my case, I'm on the East Coast of the US, so I use EDT, and it's 4 hours behind UTC. So there's universal time. So I guess that's the general time on Earth, I guess. I don't know. I gotta look into what that is. But we're gonna set my clock set, and let's go on and look at what my time is. It's gonna be 3:19, right? So first, I need to see what the syntax is for it. So clock, oh, is it global config? No, we gotta go back one. Clock set, and we're gonna do 03. We're gonna do 19, and then 00 for the seconds, right? Incomplete command. All right, so what do they want now? Month of the year, that's right, because it's in month. The month is August, and it's 17, 20, 22, right? So there we go. So now we're gonna do show clock detail. Told you guys, I really not NTP guy, but it's important because it helps us to narrow down when errors happened, when something went down. It helps us to troubleshoot better, right? So having the correct time on your devices is essential. I think it also helps security breaches, which is right up your alley, Lewis. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but having the time configured correctly on these devices is certainly important, right? So now we had issued this command in enable mode, right? Sets the time to UTC. Again, since I'm 4 hours behind UTC, I'll add 4 hours to my current time. So 4 hours to my current time is 3:19 UTC, right? Or right now it's gonna be 3:21 UTC, right? And we showed the source of the clock. Now iOS shows the current time source, which is going to show that is configured by a user, as you can see right here, right? So that's essentially how we configure the time. We have to make sure we configure the time on the correct time on the device, and then we got to move on to the next router, right? So Lewis says, yes, it does help, especially for auditing, troubleshooting, and recovering. Absolutely. So glad to have a cybersecurity guy in here, letting us know the importance of having correct time on our devices, right? So the next step, configure R1 as an Ntp server with the default stratum level, which is 8. So I explained earlier that the stratum level is basically an indication of how authoritative the time source is, right? So what we're gonna do for R1 is we're just essentially going to make it the Ntp server with the default stratum, which is 8, right? So now we gotta go in enable mode, conf T, and we enter the Ntp master command, right? There's other commands out there that is gonna kind of like might trip you up. There's the Ntp master, which makes the device the server, the local device that you're configuring the Ntp master command on the server. And then you have Ntp server, which makes the device the client, and it also makes it the server, right? Which we're gonna see in a second. We're gonna configure Ntp server commands on R2, well, on R2, Ntp server command on R2, and then R3 is going to be able to become an Ntp client of R2, right? So that's how that works. And also R2 is able to specify its time source via R1. So it's going to point to R1 and is going to make that its time source. So the server command allows for it to be the server and client mode for Ntp master. Ntp master is just making the device the server, right? So now we're on R1 still, right? And as I have in my notes, this allows for the router to act as Ntp server when a device points to it by specifying its IP address in the Ntp server. Got to specify the IP command, right? Step 3 is we're gonna run on over to R2, and we gotta configure its time. Let me see, do show clock. We see that it's the default time. And what we wanna do is also set the time on this router, right? But we have to go back one, go into enable mode, clock, time zone, EDT 4. I think I skipped a step on my previous device. We're gonna go back and do that. This is gonna be in config mode. So conf T, we're gonna do clock, time zone, EDT4, right? So now we have it EDT4, but now we need to go back because I think I forgot to set it to EDT. I think I did. Yep. So let's do clock, time zone, EDT4, right? Do show clock. So now it's gonna display. We're setting it to display in EDT, not UTC. But when these Ntp servers sync up, or these Ntp clients and servers sync up, they're gonna sync using UTC, right? And when we do the clock time zone EDT, it allows for us to display our time using, it allows it to display our time using EDT. And right now, not really sure why it's saying 724. Because it's not 724 over here. So, anyway, let's move on. We're gonna hammer that out in a second. So now, exit. It's gonna be one of those labs I'm gonna have to do over and over again to hammer down the concepts, right? Clock set, and we're on what, step 3? Yeah, clock set. Oh, also, yeah, you know what? That's probably what it is. But anyway, clock set. Let me see. Step 3 is configure R2 to sync its time to R1. Ntp syncs the time in UTC only. Show clock time zone, and then we're gonna do the Ntp server, and we're gonna use the IP address on R1. I should have specified it here. Let me see. Do show IP in brief, and for so for G00, it's going to be 172.16.1.1. So 172.16.1.1. And that takes a little bit, it's going to take a little bit to sync. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit to sync. So yeah, we got to wait a little bit for that. And then we can probably move on to step 4, which is to do clock time zone EDT4, which again allows us to set the offset of the UTC. Let me see, clock time zone EDT4, right? And then we're gonna do the Ntp server, and we're gonna use R2's IP address that it's connected to on the network to get the to get the time synchronized properly, right? Is this related to the performance-based questions? I think that's how it's called. Yeah, so this is essentially for the Ccna, right? Again, this is me polishing up my skills and making sure that they stay intact for the Ccna, because the Ccna has a lot of material on it that you should know fundamentally, right? So essentially, labbing is good for the performance-based questions that people who are taking these exams might encounter, right? Because Cisco posted a blog post recently and said that they're going to start including some I think performance-based lab type of questions on their exams. So yeah, this is really good for that, because if you know how to configure the concepts and you know how to get everything to work properly despite how you approach the solution, as long as you approach the solution properly, then you should be, good to go. For the CompTIA A+, they also have performance-based questions, and they're more it's not so much configuration, but I'd say it's more, I think they're more along the lines of applying the concepts that you learned while you were studying, right? So yeah. So now we what do we do on R2? Okay, do show IP in brief, and it's going to be 2.1, right? Ntp server 172.16.2.1, right? And then it's going to get its time from R2. So let's go back to R2 real quick and let's see something. Do show clock. All right, so it's essentially synced. Let's see, do show clock. Yes, it's synced up with, as you can see, it's synced up with R1. R2 synced up with R1. I want to be specific, can't just say it. R2 synced up with R1 with regard to its time, right? And then we know that we got to verify it by, and also, Lewis, how basically the CCNA works for studying is that they have a lot of configure and verification in the exam objectives. So you'll see things like configure and verify IPv4 and subnetting, configure and verify NTP, configure and verify VLANs, right? So I just did a configuration between R1 and R2 to allow for NTP synchronization between these two devices. Now I'm going to verify it using what's called a show command, and that's show Ntp Associations. I can't spell. No, it's because I didn't put do, right? And the reason why you keep seeing this pop up is because I'm trying to do show commands in the global configuration mode, but there's a way around that, and that's by specifying the do keyword, which allows us to view show commands, right? So now this output, right, the show output, this is important because it shows us our NTP associations. This show command, this show output says that R2 is getting its time from R1, right? This is its R1's IP address, and it's showing that R1's reference clock is itself. And we know that it's itself because it's using a loopback address. Loopback addresses are used in NTP to define or specify the time source, right? So now let's do show clock details. Another way to verify. Time source is NTP. So we've successfully synchronized these two devices to allow for NTP synchronization. Albeit the time is wrong. I need to set the correct time. I screwed that up, but yeah, practice makes perfect. But I did synchronize the time between the devices. I just got to learn how to properly configure the time on the devices, because that could be a security risk, right, Lewis? Definitely a security risk right there. So yeah, I'm more specialized in like I like to build out topologies and dynamic routing protocols, switching, stuff like that. This is a weak spot for me, and this is why I'm practicing it right now, right? So this should have already synchronized. Let's check by checking its time. We could do it like that. We can do show clock. Okay, that seems like it's synchronized, but let's check do show clock detail. It is definitely synchronized because it says the time source is NTP, so we know that's all good. Now we can also do a further verification by doing do show Ntp Associations. So what we see here now is R3's Ntp server is defined as 172.16.2.1, which is R2's IP address on this interface right here. I need to start putting those text labels. And then it says that R2 is getting its time from this server right here, which happens to be R1, right? So that's essentially how you configure NTP synchronization. Lewis said, yeah. It's good to have cybersecurity folk in your circle, because yeah, I want to go the network engineering route, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to need some people to look over my shoulder and say, hey, yeah, get that time configured correctly, or harden that switch, make sure that unauthorized MAC addresses aren't allowed there, which is what we're going to work on next. Funny that you're in here. We're going to work on port security, a port security lab next. Pretty straightforward stuff, but it's another topic that I neglect it sometimes. I don't work on it as much as I do the routing and switching stuff. So yeah, we're going to harden a switch using, let me save this before it crashes on me. We're going to harden a switch in a second, right? So that's basically NTP configuration. That's a very simple way to do it. I think next time I'm going to do this lab again, but then I'm going to throw in some Ntp authentication. That's another kind of like cybersecurity thing, because we don't want to allow our devices to get its time from any old time source. We want to get our devices time from devices that we trust, because as we mentioned earlier, if you get some fugazi time on your machines, you're leaving yourself open to attacks, auditing issues like Lewis said, and different things like that, right? So that's pretty much it for Ntp configuration. Also, what we can do with the Ntp server command is we can do this 172.16.2.1 and we put prefer, right? When we put prefer, that essentially means, and I don't know what's going on here, but when we put prefer, did I put the keyword in incorrectly? Let me see. Trying to see where my thing is, right? I got a ton of Cisco books in there that I bought, by the way. I probably put the command incorrectly, but we can put the Ntp server prefer command to prefer a specific server over another when that server is up. If that server is down, we can put in, I don't know, we could put in, oops, dang, what did I do? We could put in multiple Ntp servers, Ntp server. I don't know if this is gonna be legit because I didn't set one up on this IP address. We could do that, and then we could just do, I think it's, where do I put the prefer command? The prefer keyword. I think it's, is it here? Or is packet tracer not allowing it? Prefer. No, let me see. I think I have the syntax correct. It's just not, yeah, I have the syntax correct. I don't understand why packet tracer, as usual, is not allowing me to do it. So basically, as you can see over here, if we want to put Ntp server, let's say it's this right here, we could put prefer, and we see that it says that it specifies a preferred Ntp server if multiple ones are configured. It is recommended to configure more than one Ntp server for that good old redundancy. We want a lot of redundancy in our network in many different ways. So yeah, once again, that is Ntp configuration. Simple, straightforward. I'll probably do this lab again and include Ntp authentication so that I can get the practice configuring time, because that is clearly a weakness of mine, and we can practice with different methods of hardening the network.